All right, so to understand where we are, we have to understand the death of Queen Elizabeth I.
What?
So
no,
buckle up,
I don't
guys.
want
This is going to take a while.
I don't want to understand. I don't care about the death of any queen.
This ushered in what we call the Jacobean era of theater and literature, which is characterized by weak female characters and, of course, lots of deaths. Now, let's ignore the fact that Titus Andronicus was written when Elizabeth I was still technically alive and well.
I often like to ignore things that go against my point.
Why are we opening the podcast with a discussion of the world's most boring subject matter?
No, it could get more boring. We could talk about how
cares?
Hamlet is Shakespeare specifically going back to Seneca.
I don't give a
and
fuck
While also
about
talking about his dead son, Hamlet.
What I would like to,
yes.
that's true, Hamlet. But what I would like to talk about here is anything but fucking Queen Elizabeth.
Butt fucking. You said butt fucking
That's-
Queen Elizabeth.
That's pretty funny.
That's enough to get you on trial in the tower at the very least.
Oi! Butt fucking Queen Elizabeth!
Oh, this guy over here thinks he could go bugger our queen.
Put his head on the bridge! I'm sorry, did someone say Richard Burbage? No, I said put his head on the bridge. Oh, I thought you said Richard Burbage.
No, I'm sorry. I got bad news. London Bridge is falling down.
Oh, God.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast in the world unafraid to butt-fuck the Queen of England. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians, and I do want to say I'm in the minority, but I am afraid to butt-fuck the Queen of England.
That's fair. I mean, look, she's obviously a power bottom, and that has some consequences.
Shakespeare also was a power bottom with consequences.
What are we talking about today, Josh?
Syphilis.
We're talking about Shakespeare, everybody's favorite topic. The most overrated playwright in the world, according to some.
Are you some, Josh?
I'm fine with Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare...
I think it might be presumptuous, but fair to say that the position of everyone in this podcast is that Hamlet is good, actually.
Yeah, it's a good play. It's a good play. And
We liked the play.
what we were going to be talking about on this installment of the podcast is the play, Hamlet, a little bit. But more specifically, we are going to be looking at the film Hamlet from 2000 starring Ethan Hawke. And buckle in, folks.
The only time that Hamlet has been made into a film.
The only time. We don't don't speak of the others. It was directed by Michael Almereyda, and it's colloquially known as Hamlet 2000, which I can't get the Simpsons joke out of my head.
It came out in 2000, and it's also set in the modern day.
And it is one of probably the most 2000s movies I've ever seen. Like, I've seen a lot of movies, obviously, that are set around that time, you know, sort of the turn of the millennium or whatever. I would argue that this movie is one of the most of its time, which was the point. This film was designed to really take the classic play Hamlet that you know and love and update it a little bit.
This movie is filmed by, honestly, a really lovely cinematographer, John de Boorman.
Nice.
He's the best of all possible Bormans.
Yes. It's like the second or third movie that Jason Blum produced of Blumhouse.
Oh, really?
That Blum, yeah. Yeah, the guy who's like a billionaire and now every movie produced is by Jason Blum. The 90s, for whatever reason, saw an explosion of Shakespeare movies.
Right.
1991 kicked it off with Hamlet, directed by Zeffirelli, the guy who did the 70s Romeo and Juliet that we all watched in high school and had the teacher fast forward through that nude scene with the underage actors.
Yes, also the barber in Sweeney Todd that tries to blackmail Sweeney and meets an untimely end.
That movie is bad. Like, Mel Gibson is Hamlet.
That's the Gibson one, yeah.
Helena Bonham Carter is Ophelia, which is actually kind of fun. Then, of course, we get Kenneth Branagh's career, and he does a Hamlet as well a couple years earlier. We'll talk about that a little bit. That might require its own episode just because of how much we hate it.
Yeah.
So you had a bunch of Branagh movies, Much Ado, whatever.
Right.
Which were very like traditional to the text. Like his whole thing was like, let's get every single word of this onto the screen in some capacity.
And the Much Ado movie is very cute. Like it's
Much Ado's great. Yeah. Keanu Reeves is miscast, but that's
Machado.
Then
in what is it, 96? Do we get the Baz Luhrmann Romeo plus Juliet? That's how Almereyda made a movie that he wanted to make, but was able to pitch it to the studios as a cheap cash-in to try to grab onto Baz Luhrmann fever.
And I think actually made, spoilers for my thoughts about Hamlet 2000, but like an infinitely better movie.
I don't think it's hard to do that.
There are aspects of our
and of course, that was starring Leo DiCaprio and Claire Danes.
Yeah.
And
what really matters is Mercutio.
Yes.
The movie does Mercutio very, very well.
Who is Mercutio in that one? I've never been able to make it past the first 15 minutes because that's how much I fucking hate that movie.
It's like Jamie Kennedy just will not get off the screen.
The bite your thumb scene, which I still am convinced was the inspiration for at least in part, for the gas station scene in Zoolander. For some reason, it just feels very similar to me.
Oh, fuck. I think you might be right. It's Harold Perrineau who plays Mercutio. Okay. He's fucking fabulous.
He was, and he was really great on Lost, and Lost really did him dirty, I thought.
Oh, really?
They just had him scream Walt every other scene, and he was actually a really good actor, and then they really screwed his character over.
That guy.
He's mostly a TV actor, but that should have, I don't know, made him a bigger star than Leonardo DiCaprio, honestly.
Yeah. The takeaway from Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, and the thing that made it so sensational at the time is, from the open where you've got the two households alike in dignity, that's a newscaster. And then they immediately cut from and then and it's a modern newscaster on a modern television. And then they immediately cut from the newscaster to the dare you bite your thumb at me thing. And again, it's like these guys, and they're cool guys, and again, they're,
they have sword guns.
They have guns of the brand Sword. Yeah. Fucking awesome. And by awesome, I mean horrible.
Yeah, bad. They should have just changed it to gun. They should have just said the word gun.
They should have said the word gun. But again, they couldn't, because there was this weird thing of like, we need to be very literal about the text while still doing a really, really hackneyed job of bringing it into the 20th century.
And so we have actually like this long history of modern Hamlets, starting with an American movie of all things. So in 1945, a B movie called Strange Illusion comes out.
Do you like jazz?
Jimmy Lydon, Sally Eilers, Warren William, a bunch of nobodies. This is a low-grade film about like the lieutenant governor of California getting assassinated and his son figuring that out. There's another modern adaptation that comes out in 1959 called The Rest is Silence, which is a German film.
That tracks with a name like The Rest is Silence.
So I haven't seen either of these two movies. The Rest is Silence seems to focus on the presence of Nazis in contemporary Germany at the time.
Okay.
People who were still holding power in Western Germany, who were definitely Nazis, who had not been prosecuted, who weren't being rooted out of the system of power.
Sure.
The next adaptation came just, 60 or 61 in another Axis power, former Axis power, The Bad Sleep Well by Akira Kurosawa.
Which is a lovely movie that will break your brain if you try and put it directly into Hamlet.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of that film watching it being like, okay, but who's Claudius and
it doesn't,
is Rosencrantz?
It doesn't work.
It does not fit at all. Like he took all the good bits he wanted and then just threw out the rest.
It takes pieces of it. There's an Ophelia type character who goes insane, but that's just illustrated by her showing up in the last scene and the Laertes character saying, she's insane now.
Looks exactly the same.
And in the 1980s, and this is the movie that's the actual direct inspiration for Almereyda's Hamlet, Hamlet Goes Business, a Finnish movie by the legendary producer Aki Kaurismäki. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but no Finn will ever listen to this podcast. I know that for a fact. They're too busy with their hydraulic presses and their folk metal.
I'm gonna make sure that the Finns listen. I'm going to find the Finns and I'm going to bring them over and I'm going to tell them that one of my co-podcasters is a dirty Swede.
Well, this is a factor in the Finnish Hamlet, actually.
Oh, really? Really?
This movie fucking rocks. This is the best Hamlet movie I've seen in my entire life. Whoa. And I'll just give you like a small rundown of what happens. First of all, Kaurismäki says, oh yeah, I just read Hamlet once right before I decided to write this script. That's definitely not true because there are some conversations that do line for line match up with Hamlet, the comedic conversations where Hamlet's pretending to be crazy.
Sure.
But everything else is completely split up. Beat for beat, it kind of follows the plot structure of Hamlet, but everything is weird. People who love each other now hate each other. People who were best friends, like Hamlet and Horatio. Horatio's now his driver, and Hamlet's telling him, oh yeah, I'm going to be pretending to be crazy now because I saw the ghost of my father. And he's like, I don't care. Why are you talking to me?
So it basically just like takes all of your expectations. It subverts them.
And so Hamlet Goes Business, it's shot in black and white. It's in the 80s, and it's about this like lumber mill company that is looking at possibly getting a hostile takeover from some Swedish like rubber duck magnate.
Yeah, and that's why in Hamlet 2000, Julia Stiles, when she's returning all of Hamlet's letters, she also takes out a little rubber ducky.
And so like Hamlet is introduced in a kitchen, and there's a woman, like one of their maids, just cutting a ham, and he goes, ham, let me.
Yeah. Okay, it's that kind of movie.
He cuts off a slice of ham, this huge, thick slice of ham, and then he's just carrying it around, just eating it out of his own hand. So he's this like pig. Yeah. Ophelia purely wants to marry him for the purposes of getting his inheritance. Mm-hmm. And so she won't have sex with him, and all he cares about is just banging her once.
Well, I mean, it reveals Hamlet as fuckboy, which I think is actually in the text.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like everybody in this story is just a terrible goon. You don't love any of them. I won't say anything more about the movie, but there is a death scene that is one of the funniest I've ever seen in any movie. Very dry, very weird Finnish humor, and you should absolutely go out and watch that movie as well.
Before we serve up the movie and talk about what it was that we liked or disliked about it, the reason that we do this show is we are interested in interrogating popular culture. Sometimes it's really popular stuff that sucks ass. Sometimes it's stuff that is not so popular that sort of sucks ass or is interesting in other ways. We try to take that pop culture, interrogate it, figure out if it's something that has interest to it, why it couldn't quite pull off the thing maybe that it was trying to do. And I feel like that's really the thrust of our conversation today.
The biggest key to understanding this era is understanding the 90s. And as Hamlet is a movie that came out in 2000, it is a movie fundamentally about the 90s. Yes. And the next movie that we'll watch for the next episode is also fundamentally about the 90s. And I think we never really came to grips with what was going on in that era because 2001 rolls around, 9/11 happens, and then we get caught in complete insanity for years afterwards that we're only now even starting to acknowledge. And then we have to find the layers of what goes behind it. And I think this is a very worst of all possible worlds kind of movie in the mood that it sets and the venue that it tries to live in for a little while.
So let's talk about that. The movie starts off with the what a piece of work is the man.
Almereyda is terrified of technology. And I think as a culture at 2000, we had just like gotten past the Y2K scare. And so there's something like simmering in the background of this movie.
Right.
There's always a screen of some kind in the background of every shot. There's always a monitor or there's always some sort of TV playing that sort of haunts over the whole movie.
I'm going to disagree with this idea that he's terrified of technology. I think for Almereyda, it's an addiction that he is always trying to... I think he's very excited by it because you see throughout the movie the different ways that he uses screens. Everyone is looking through screens. There's always a TV on in the background, and what's on the TV is always important. And he specifically has Hamlet going around, and you see video footage right at the beginning when he's giving the Two Solid Flesh speech.
Yeah.
Hamlet's going around with a Pixel Vision camera, PXL 2000, which is a bizarre device. It was made by Fisher-Price. It was literally supposed to be a toy. And so you see it's black and white. It's got a very, very low resolution image. That camera is made to work with audio cassette tapes.
Really?
Like the stuff that Adventures in Odyssey is on.
So that's slide that into your camera. Then is the super duper lo-fi aesthetic comes from the fact that there's not a lot of space on that tape for the data.
And it's important because Almereyda made his first movie, Another Girl, Another Planet, with a Pixel Vision camera.
Okay.
The entire movie, which was a big thing in the early 90s. I think Gus Van Sant worked with it. Soderbergh did some with a Pixel Vision. So we've gone from Almereyda making a movie on a Pixel Vision to having his protagonist carrying a Pixel Vision and a little Pixel Vision editor around with him wherever he goes.
And we then, of course, see Hamlet, played by Ethan Hawke, schlep that very camera in with him to a press conference that is being held by, of course, his uncle, Claudius. Now, for those of you who are not totally familiar with Hamlet the play, worth noting, the way that they frame this up at the beginning is recut a little bit compared to the original. In the original,
the first scene is the ghost appears on the ramparts to the guards, to Horatio, and they say, we got to go find Hamlet.
Right.
It's probably Shakespeare's best first scene. I think Shakespeare productions always suck in the first scene because you just get flooded with a shit ton of exposition that you can't understand.
Ironically, I feel like the way that they cut the script actually makes the mistake that so many of Shakespeare's plays make in their original iteration, which is it front loads it with exposition.
Yeah.
We don't know.
And the nice thing about Hamlet, the play, is that you actually get used to the language before the exposition happens. And you're right, this movie has removed that, and so we're stuck with the exposition at the top.
Ethan Hawke as Hamlet coming into a press conference with Kyle MacLachlan as Claudius, and
reprising his role from the Flintstones movie.
That's right. And Kyle MacLachlan is talking about how he is taking over the Kingdom of Denmark, which in this film, because it was the 90s, Denmark is the name of a corporation.
Denmark Corp, baby. They make Denmarks.
The logo of Denmark Corporation is an abstract rendering of the Globe Theater.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah. It's a little wooden O that has a globe in the middle of it. So there we go.
So then after this, Laertes, who we will later learn is going to be a key figure later on, says hi to Claudius after the press conference. And then who shows up but motherfucking Bill Murray as Polonius.
Yeah.
The most divisive figure, I think, in this film, at least amongst the hosts of this podcast.
Yeah.
But I will say that prior to taping, I was a bigger defender of Bill Murray from my memory. And then actually going back and rewatching his performance, I went, oh no, he doesn't know the lines.
When you hear it the first time, you think Bill Murray is Polonius. That's great. They know that Polonius is supposed to be funny, which it seems like a lot of productions forget for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, he's funny, but he can't do it. He's not up to the task. And from the very first scene, he looks incredibly uncomfortable everywhere that he goes in this movie.
Yeah, it looks like he's really trying to remember the lines. And there's a thing, like, you can tell whenever you're watching an actor who's struggling with lines, I always get like incredibly anxious because I can see them like darting through their head and trying to remember them. And then I can't actually watch their performance because I'm like, I'm seeing a person like trying to remember as opposed to like living in the moment.
I think also the root of how Bill Murray's sense of humor works just doesn't fit with Polonius. Like, he's either good at playing someone who's always very self-aware and commenting on the situation that he's in, or a totally far-gone imbecile like in Caddyshack.
A film I've never seen because I'm scared to.
The little scenes with the gopher are kind of Looney Tunes-ish, which is fun, but the rest of the movie's not that great. But Bill Murray as Polonius has to be all bluster. He has to be so certain of everything that he's doing. And he's not just like completely mush-brained idiot. He's just so certain of everything that he says that the actual truth just sails right past him because he can't look at it.
What is exactly his relation? He's like a friend.
He's the advisor.
Well, so like in the play, Polonius is something akin to like a prime minister or a councilman or something. He is a close sycophant to the king. He is like maybe the second most powerful family in the nation. Right.
And also Polonius has a daughter whose name is Ophelia. And Hamlet has the hots for Ophelia. And that's going to be important later on.
And there's some implication that he and Ophelia had a previous relationship of some kind that has had a recent falling out.
Hard to know.
So Hamlet left and he's been going to school somewhere else in Wittenberg. And then he's come back. But his and Ophelia's relationship has been ongoing.
And they've been sending each other a lot of letters, too. That's a big part of it.
And Polonius is not a big fan of that. He knows what men are like. They're going to deflower his daughter.
And Laertes is also very concerned about.
Laertes is Polonius's son, the brother to
Ophelia's
Ophelia.
brother.
Who is very worried about his sister's deflowering as well.
In this movie, he is played by Liev Schreiber.
Who I would argue is giving the one performance that feels the most Shakespearean.
I disagree.
You know?
I fucking hated it, but we'll get to that.
No. Well, that's what I mean. It's like, it's very like, I'm set. What is it, apple crate Shakespeare or
I understand.
Barrel Shakespeare, where you put one leg up on a barrel and it's like, to be or not to be.
Right.
Like, that's what it, he's the only one in the movie that
The
feels
tone
that
of
way.
the movie overall, and it's worth noting, is, I mean, yes, it's Shakespeare, but it is very much Shakespeare in the modern day. You know, they are speaking in a tone that I would say is heightened. They are aware of the cadence at which, you know, iambic pentameter works. But
And I think this is part of where the movie suffers, is that it doesn't come down on a fixed definition of how it wants these deliveries to happen. Right. So Bill Murray is completely in the dark. Like, I think it's largely a failure on Almereyda's part, not just for casting him, but
I saw
for
it as a
not
directing issue
him.
more than an acting issue, personally.
And Ethan Hawke oftentimes will give, like when he sees the ghost, he says, you know, be thou spirit of health or goblin damned, be thy intents, blah, 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 blah. Instead of saying that to the ghost is still on the balcony. And so he's directed into having to just say it idly as he's making his way to the door to talk to the ghost.
Right.
I do like the Marcellus and Bernardo scene where they kind of do it as a flashback and they show the security footage. Again, you see screens and you see cameras and you see that's how the ghost appears. Everyone points out the Pepsi One machine.
I pointed out, I took it down in my notes, the fucking Pepsi One machine. It's fucking meant.
It's really cool.
It is funny because Pepsi One is like the perfect 90s product.
Apparently, the day that they were shooting that scene, somebody who was on set said to Almereyda when they were looking into the security footage, this reminds me of Scooby-Doo. And he's like, I didn't take that as an insult. I took it as inspiration. And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of person I want helming my Shakespeare.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Thanks for listening to this preview of our premium episode on Hamlet. Now, if you'd like to hear the whole thing, then why don't you get your Tutu Solid Flesh to subscribe to our Patreon? And where's the beauteous majesty of Denmark, you may be asking? Well, it's right here with our sponsors on Patreon. That includes Aeneas Hemphill, Ari Rodriguez, Ben Ferber, Benjamin R. Alford, Bill Davis Vandestieg, Dominic Russo, Nate Netzley, Octavia Immersive, Trevor Strunk, with special thanks to Ashley Stoneman, Nikola Donov, Sam Borman, and Timmy Sexton. All right, folks. The rest is silent.